Good lunch. So I think we had a fantastic start to the day. The morning was very productive and very interesting that many of the discussions that I was part of here in the little breakout group were sort of segueing very nicely into our next presentation. So without any delay, I'd like to introduce you all to Will Tullett, movement specialist at Chelsea Football Academy and recent joined the troops of being a father. So I'm going to hand everything over to Will. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Glenn. I think the first person that's breathing a sigh of relief is Sylvia, as when I came up here for the acro course on Thursday, she told me that she was worried I wasn't going to turn up this weekend because she had a dream, and this morning I texted her and said, sorry, I forgot I'd moved to Mexico. So that didn't happen, and I'm here, so we'll get started. But, I mean, I started talking to Glenn a little while ago. He came into the club, and we started talking sort of football and circus and sort of how the two could link. And it really got me thinking as to where can we use some of the skills that circus really utilise, and how can we use that within a development environment, and how can we use that to physically develop our young players. And I think previously I'd really started thinking, like a lot of people in the, I guess, S&C world, I started thinking down the gymnastics route. And for me, gymnastics, I don't know, but for one reason or another, didn't quite sit totally comfortably with me. Whether it was too restrictive in terms of a very linear and staged approach to progression. And through talking to Glenn, I think that little bit more freedom, a little bit more creativity around some of the acrobatic principles really so resonated with me a little bit more in terms of the circus environment. So that's really my kind of take from today. We're going to talk a lot more about the development of the athlete. So I think a little bit of a different tack to some of the other people you'll talk over the weekend, who will talk perhaps a little bit more about when we're at that top end, when we are performers, when we are 20 plus, when we are in our professions. But I want to talk a little bit about how we get there. And I think it's really important to understand how you get there, whether you work with those athletes, getting them there, or whether you work with athletes who are there already. I think obviously if you're working with young athletes, as a lot of people here will within the National Centre, it's obviously important to understand the pathway and optimise that pathway. But equally, if you're purely working with performers at the top end, it's important to understand where have they come from, what have they done, any blocks that they might have, what is their history, what have they experienced in their development. And I think that's quite an important thing to do. So really, from my background, to give you some context as to kind of how I've come about the approach that I'm going to share with you today, is initially I started as in the medical profession. So I was based in exercise rehab, end-stage rehab, movement redevelopment, movement re-education, should I say, and really through studying abroad, through working out in Europe, I've really come around now to sort of hone the studies around movement development, around kids from 8 years old right through to professional athletes, and really it's culminating in me currently developing this through a professional doctorate in elite performance, specialising within movement development. So that's kind of some context as to sort of how some of the ideas have come about. As we get started, I just want to kind of set out a few things that I really wanted to try and hit today. So I want to propose first and foremost a model of motor skill enrichment for physical development. So how much extra ideas can we do around and do things that don't look like our discipline, don't look like our sport, and how can we use those to facilitate a performance enhancement and an injury resilience? Okay, I'll touch briefly on an overview of the environment that this model is placed in. So you get some context as, obviously, it's placed at the moment within a football environment, but the principles can be applied in any environment. So the principles can be applied across the board. But I'll give you a brief overview as to the type of player, the amount of contact time I think is important as well. Okay, so this might seem a little bit strange, but our development outcome similarities between football and circus. Okay, so something that might seem complete opposite ends of the spectrum will have a little, sorry?
They both play footballs.
Yeah, there's one. I'll add that to my slide. But what are the similarities? You know, that at first, on first light, they look polar opposites, but I think there are some things that we have in common. And then we'll try to set out what are the benefits. Why use this approach of using things that are totally alien and look totally different to what we want to ultimately perform and excel and be elite performers within. And then at the end we will go through just some practical examples of that this does happen. Sometimes people feel that this can be just a theory, in that why the hell would any professional environment use things that are so different to what the sport is? And it will just give some examples as to how it's integrated within the program, and again might spark some thoughts from you guys as to how you could integrate it into your environment as well. But ultimately, I want to kind of challenge and provoke a little bit of thought and a little bit of conversation around this area, because it can be a little bit controversial. People like to train what they train and get really objective measures for their progressions. So doing something that perhaps isn't so measurable, isn't so quantitative, isn't so numbers driven, how can we use that? And really, it's that importance of thinking and looking outside our own arena to find some improvements. Okay, so we'll start with basically overview, real quick, couple of minutes overview. So obviously a football club is a professional football club environment. We work with around 190 players between 9 to 21 years of age. Obviously within that we have huge different, one, abilities, two, coaching and delivery methods vary hugely. Challenges across that development pathway is huge. And we're really aiming to produce players for a really, really high level. So by aiming to produce players within the Premiership is a very, very, very tough ask. So what we're trying to achieve is pretty tough. We have a huge amount of supporting departments, but the whole focus is player-led, athlete-led, or athlete-centered, should I say, and coach-led. Okay? So everything will be focused around the player, and the coach will pull those supporting departments together. So the coach dictates the programs alongside the player. Okay? So this program is one supporting department that the coach will need to pull together and put into practice for that player. Our physical development work, especially with the younger age groups, really needs to fit in to their coaching time. So we have a limited coaching time with our younger players. As you can see, only 3 or 4 sessions per week. Well, really 3 sessions per week in the younger age groups. And the 4th session is a match, so we really have no impact in terms of a training session on that day. And that's around 5.5 hours of training contact per week. So within that, we need to affect our technical coaching, we need to affect our physical development, and any other of those supporting departments within that as well. So time is kind of a premium, really, and the way that we can kind of integrate those together, I think, is the way that we optimize that the most. And then above that, obviously our coaching time, we have a bit more of a captive audience. We do have full-time players from the age of 15 upwards. They're in a school program, 15, 16, so it's not quite so football driven at that stage. Now, similarities. Glenn and I talked about this. Similarities only came out from a conversation, really. And really, how can something like that, I don't know if that's a good circus picture or not. I've Googled it. How can something like that look like football? That looks nothing like football. Some people say it probably would. Right? He's lost his dish shape and all sorts there. See? But I'm not talking about football theatrics. Okay? I'm talking about our development outcomes. What are we after? So you would say to me, well, we're individual performers. and you're a team sport? I would say yes. On a performance scale, we perform as a team, probably just like you guys would. However, within a football club academy development environment, we cannot develop a team. At no point do we develop a team which runs through and expect that to go on and perform as a team. We're performing individuals or developing individuals within that team to apply those skills, whatever those skills may be, into a performance at the end. Now, the end of the journey for these guys, like the end of the journey for a lot of you guys that come through the National Centre, is we go on to what we call a loan. So the clubs, when they're about 18, 19, 20 years old, they go out and they go and join another club for a period of 6 months, a year. And what we're asking them to do is go out as individuals and take the skills they've learned within that team and that education school environment and go and apply it to a different manager or artistic director with different teammates who play in a completely different style of play and go and succeed. Off you go and succeed. And almost conversely to that as well, what they're doing is auditioning to come back to us. So we're asking them to go and use the skills we teach you and the style of play that we've coached you in, go and apply them with some other guy's ideas who might want to hoof it from back to front and get in a fight with everyone else where we might have taught you to play nice, tricky football, but apply your skills and be adaptable. And I think that's a key word for the program really, is that adaptability, to come back and play at our club. So those kind of similarities in terms of developing individuals, I think is quite an important one to remember. Now, a clear physical development model is really, really, really key, and something that we've worked really hard on over the last 5 years that I've been at the club, to get that really clear model. Because for me, there's a multitude of benefits, obviously, to having a clear physical development model. Sort of some of the 3 key ones that we pick out is that long-term physical potential. How are we going to develop that? Because too often do we see people wanting to be the best performer at 12 years old. I am not interested in the slightest in the best performer at 12 years old. I'd like the best performer at 22 years old, because that's when they're going to get picked for the first team, get a professional contract extension, and that is when the key point comes in. And I really think that the focus around the younger age groups and focus around right up to 21 should be development first and performance when it's applicable. So we have performances every week in terms of a match, and yes, the performances are important, but let's not blur that into the training week, that is the development. And in my opinion, we have in this country, in a lot of different sports, we have sports that drive funding by performance at really young age groups. And in my opinion, that is doing young people a disservice, because that drives us as coaches to write programs that prove that I'm improving that player, and that makes our programs linear, and it makes our programs numbers driven. Okay, and I think there's a lot of subtleties out there within development and within movement skill development that get lost because of that model. Youth development is about as far from linear as you can possibly imagine. We've all been kids who have home lives, hormones, girlfriends, growth. How can anyone expect you to follow a program which fits this nice, lovely trend line? So I think having programs that drive that is a bit of a misdemeanor, really. Promote health and longevity through the athletes' careers. So not only do we want long, healthy careers, but we want long, healthy lives afterwards. So my job is to develop someone as a rounded athlete, enables them to perform, but not at the expense of breaking down at 40, 50 years old. You know, what are we driving? What kind of approaches are we taking that isn't just showing us that we're improving at that stage? This kind of delves into the idea of early specialization. Anyone who's done any kind of research or reading around youth development will have come across early specialization, early diversification, and the ideas of how quickly do you choose one sport and stick at one sport? Or in your case, how quickly do you choose one discipline and train purely that discipline? I think that is, there are some early specialization sports which are important for that, and those are the early peaking sports. So gymnastics is a prime example of an early specialization sport. Your peak and your performance peak is relatively young in comparison to other sports. However, in a sport like ours, when I'm asking them to peak at 22, 25, 28, 33, it's not. If you guys are graduating at 21, 22 from the program and beginning your careers, it is not an early specialization sport. If you specialize early, you run the risk of causing injury and dropout later on down the line. And enhance injury resilience. So physical performance development and injury resilience, injury prevention is all as one. Separating the two, I think, is a very difficult thing to do. I'm going to quickly run over different approaches in the quest for physical literacy. So out there's loads of models. Again, I'll just flash this up for just to give an example of some ideas that are out there. Anyone, again, who's looked into youth development will have come across long-term athlete development models, Bailey being the prime example. Unfortunately, windows of opportunity and different staged processes and linear processes like this, although they might look nice and be able to put lovely programs together, unfortunately they're not really based in any empirical evidence, and there's not a lot to back up those kind of models. So a lot of those have been torn apart and are kind of no longer valid. But scarily, especially in our environment, they're taken as gospel. I look around a lot of other clubs, a lot of other sports, and people are still quoting longer-term athlete development models and quoting outdated and popular and in the media very well publicized programs which actually don't have a lot of foundation to them. Probably the most famous of all is that lovely 10,000 hour rule, which Ericsson put forward, and the study was on musicians. And Ericsson himself comes out and says, I was misquoted and this is not applicable to sports and it's not applicable to anything outside the realm. So again, he himself, the guy who came out with it, has actually poo-pooed that one. And the other ones, really measurement tools. You know, we've got a lot of commercial measurement tools that, again, from a movement development point of view, using something like this to track physical development from a movement development point of view is a little bit worrying. I look at some of the tests that you ask them to do, and if that qualifies me to go out and run around a football pitch, then I'm not so keen to rely on that myself. A lot of the long-term athlete development models actually put an importance in kind of developing the fundamental skills, and the running, the hopping, the skipping, the jumping, the pushing, the pulling, and that's key, but it's kind of oversimplistic in my view. Again, within a team sport environment where it's really multi-sensory and there's a huge amount going on, you need a little bit more about you. We need to give them a little bit more than that. So I guess this comes to, okay, you can say that about all these other approaches, but what are you proposing? What model do you use? What do you think is worthwhile? And what essentially is a motor skill enrichment approach? So I want to just spend a little bit of time here and just walk you through stage by stage what we kind of talk about in terms of how we use it in comparison to the sport. So if you think about the width of here being how wide and how broad your training is, this is your discipline or your sport. That's how wide a skill set you need to achieve your discipline in your sport. Really, really important. That's where your performance is. That's where you spend 80% of your performance. It's your core skills. It's your core movement ability and physical ability, technical ability in there. Okay? So this is typically where we would train to get our direct performance enhancement in that area. So in early years, what we are proposing is go right away from that. right away, build a broad base. If you look at this in isolation, it's nice and tall, there's a nice high peak, we've got a great performance, but it's pretty unstable. If you fall out of that through injury, you've got a long way to fall before you're caught. We want to build a nice broad base of skills. Sorry? Oh, sorry. So early years, I mean, to give you some perspective, the entry into the academy system is 8 years old. So we're probably talking below here, 5, 6s. Okay. So we want to give loads and loads of experience there. We're going up to sort of around here, we're going around 12 years old at the top of there. Okay, so big broad base of support. We want to play every other sport possible. We promote everything that you can do to really have an experience. And again, I'm not talking about learning skills out there, I'm talking about having that experience. From a development point of view, PHV, peak height velocity, growth spurt, when everybody grows and becomes awkward and uncoordinated and falls about the place, what is going on here and how can we allow for that? So we do narrow in those skills, because at that stage the brain is kind of culling motor skills really there. So we want to consolidate the skills that we need, okay, while still giving them a little bit of variation. Then we give them a big blast of refresher. So we might go back to our acrobatic skills. We might go back to playing badminton. We might go back to our karate or our grappling or something like that on the floor. So really, really strange, really miles away from the sport, and we've gone back to that. And then as we get to pre-elite, which I would class as up to sort of 21, depending on the development of the athlete, you're starting to narrow in, because again, everybody is now focusing towards the ultimate performance. Where do I want to get to? I want to become a Premiership footballer. I want to become the lead role in a performance. So we're going to come in and narrow in, but we still want to work outside that breadth. This performance is not always set. So allowing skills either side of that allows you to have a bit of a buffer zone. So when things don't go right, when a move is unexpected, and you're going something that you've never trained to do, if you're training purely in this realm, you have a zone, a buffer zone. Equally, if you do sustain injury, you've got less distance to fall. You've got more of a coping mechanism physically to be able to cope with that injury. And ultimately, when you're into that professional realm, we do appreciate that obviously the predominant amount of your time is going to be spent in the discipline that you want to do. So wasting time, as a lot of people see it in areas outside, it is a common, criticism. So a couple of guys, John Kiley and Andreas Levi, actually suggest a dosing of variation throughout a training season or throughout a training block. So not doing it consistently, as we would do with perhaps young developing guys, is actually going and dosing variation a week within every 6 weeks, a week within every 8 weeks, where actually you spend time doing a different discipline, or spend a portion of the time doing a different discipline, and again in our environment, getting exposed to acrobatics, getting exposed to martial arts, getting exposed to a different sport, to just run a different pathway, and to just change that sort of pathway that the body is going through, both neurologically and physically. And I think that's a really, really important method that we can use to become more resilient from injury and just take that constant one pathway loading off the body. Now, I guess a really classic analogy is going across the field in that. And if you walk that same pathway over and over and over and over and over again, it becomes a rut, and it becomes worn, and it becomes tired, and it becomes a problem. So if you're going across that field to get to the same destination in a multitude of different ways, you can still achieve the same outcome, but putting far less stress through that body. So far less overuse injury, far less sort of chronic load through the similar pathways, similar joints, similar movement patterns. And the benefits of a wide range of motor skills are, for me, pretty endless. Obviously, we've talked about an injury buffer. If you've only got this set of skills and that's all you've got no room for error. As soon as something goes wrong, injury, and then when I'm injured, then I'll worry about that. Then I might change my practice. Okay, a little bit of a blinkered approach, in my opinion. We need to have some prehab or some preconceived ideas of how we're going to avoid it in the first place, even if you've never had an injury. So vocabulary, and again in my realm, it's having a vocabulary of movement skills that they can use in any unique situation that comes their way. A change in tactics, a change in growth, a change in what they're being asked to do. If you've got a huge amount of skills under your belt, you're going to be able to adapt to that. And they get these from learning in these and just experiencing other things. If you never play another sport, you never experience. If you're never going to get, as a footballer, I dribble a football, great, that's all the skill I'm ever going to learn. I'm never going to really drive my agility, which I might get from playing rugby or similar. And this is probably maybe the most key point of everything. Again, we talk about physical being a supporting department or a supporting mechanism to those coaches that are in the room. It's our job, it's my job, it's the job of this program to make the individual more coachable for you. So at no point do we run this program and off we go, yeah, I've made them physically better, yeah, I've done my job. No, you need to make them physically better, but actually we need to give them to a coach and the coach be able to do what they need to do with them. I kind of take it as a bit of a personal slight if a coach comes to me and says, do you know what, great, I'm going this way with the technical work's brilliant, he's improving like this, but actually he can't move like that, so he can't do the skill I want him to do. Okay, my issue, my problem, big problem with the physical development. If a technical coach is commenting that there's physical restrictions to their progression, then there needs to be there's a problem. And again, we've spoken about physical longevity, and again, a key point is this stimulus versus learned response. So at no point when I say we get the kids to do acro, so hence coming on the intro to acro course this week with a load of guys from the team, so that we can deliver it to our young players. At no point do I want to turn them into acrobats. I have not the skills to do that, nor the inclination, nor the time. However, what we're doing is we're giving them an experience and we're giving them a stimulus response to promote adaptability, physical adaptability. So when we dose them with these different skills, all we're doing is really looking for a neurological adaptability. And I guess what I'd like to do is just spend the last 5-10 minutes or so just talking about what does it actually look like in practice. So how do we apply this within that limited contact time that we've spoken about? So within the younger age groups, and this is applicable right across the ages, is we have lots of variation in their movement skill. And that movement is integrated within that coaching session. So it's not, right, you're doing technical coaching today, boom, off you go to the coach, and it's physical now, off you go to the physical coach. Because to maximize time, but also to maximize benefit and effect, we combine the two together and we integrate the two together. So what you'll see here is you'll see a technical warm-up followed by some movement skills. So a technical warm-up is really an arrival activity where they come in, they might do some warm-up type skills and some ball skill based exercises with the coach, and then they'll come over to the movement coach and they'll go, okay, now we're going to do some acro, we're going to learn our dish position, we're going to learn our rolls, we're going to do dive rolls, whatever standard they're at. I'm going, okay. Now they go back to the coach. And it's 6 minutes, so it's a stimulus. It's 6 minutes. It's not a teaching aspect. Then they're going to go back in and they're going to go for some unopposed practice. It might be a passing drill. I work on my right foot and I work on my left foot and I'm really thinking about it. And then I'm going out and I'm doing a movement activity again. And now we're going to work on handstands and we're going to work on inversion activities. And my body's sort of saying to me, hold on a minute, what the hell is going on? But that adaptability is really, really powerful at those, especially at the younger ages. Really, really powerful. So we come back and we're going, okay, now we're going into a pose, and now there's lots of things going on, and now we've got 2 teams, just keeping the ball within your own team, keeping it off the other team. And now I've got all these other stimuluses and response and systems that are going on. And then we come out again and we go into our final block of movement, and we might play badminton. Okay? And again, the body's going, hold on a sec, this is absolute madness. And to be honest with you, the biggest thing I get from the coaches, and the biggest thing that you guys, if you try this approach, will find is that this 5 minutes, this 5 minutes, and this 5 minutes looks like crap. They cannot cope when you first do it. Coaches are going, we cannot do this. I'm wasting 15 minutes of my session. I'm going, brilliant, fantastic, just what I'm after. I want you to struggle. I want you to struggle to adapt. Because if you're cruising through the session, you're not actually achieving anything, you're not actually improving. If we're not at these age groups really going for a pure physical musculoskeletal response, I want a neural adaptability. I want to challenge you and see what you can cope with, see what you can come up with, what coping mechanisms have you got to work with these different skills. So working on that real contextual interference to promote neural adaptability is really, really key, and how we make a session flow. So again, the benefits of this, not only, we used to do, when I first joined the club, we do first 20-minute block, off you go to the conditioner, and the conditioner would do the fundamental patterns, and that would be great, and the kids would be bored by 10 minutes because the coaches were talking over there, and the physical coach had 20 kids who he couldn't control, and it really, really was ugly. So what we did was split it between there. So essentially we're getting the same amount of time, but it forces the coach to communicate with the movement coach or the physical coach and understand what each other are doing and place appropriate blocks within the session. But also, it actually keeps the session flowing. And you may find that if you try this, it does keep the session flowing, because in this block here, that would classically be, off you go and have a drink while I set on the next thing. Or go and have a drink while I'm there. Now it's no, there's none of that, you're there. And then for 6 minutes, that's the coach either prepping for his next session. Okay, what's the next thing I'm going to work on? Okay, back in. And so the session flows, and we actually maximize session time as opposed to having downtime within that. The idea of the coaches getting annoyed as well. It's a really key one. So it was the biggest battle I had, and the biggest battle that we had in putting this forward is the messiness of the technical session, because coaches are all about technical improvements within coaching sessions, and believe me, I get that. But we have to go back to, are you after a performance now, or are you going to be patient and wait for the potential later? So do you want the performance every day within training, every day, and be the best? Or actually you're going to be, okay, I've found a little chink in this good performer's armour here. He's not very adaptable. Okay? If I give him a prescribed thing and I make the session nice and progressive, and we culminate, so the coaches have a session structure where it goes nice technical warm-up, then it goes nice unopposed drill, so we're going a little bit harder, then it'll be like I say, a keep ball, one team against another, no goals, and it's a little bit more of a progression, and then at the end we'll play a game, the game. And it's a nice stepped progression, and it's nice and easy and smooth in terms of its progression. Well, some kids will excel and fly through that. But actually when it comes to changing pace or changing routine, they can't cope. So we need to, if you've got a kid that can adapt to a session like that, they'll also fly through a nice progressive session. So challenging them to be adaptable is a really, really key concept. So what I want to just share with you now is like I said, so the content of the first video is, again, not what this is about. It's about a kind of almost demonstration that this happens, this is what it looks like, this is it practically within an elite performance environment where we are very, very, very focused. Let's not get away from that. We're not trying to make nice, lovely human beings. The focus of a football academy is to make football players, and that is very much the key. But how you go about that does not have to be football from 8 years old. So, simple. The content is not dramatic, and can be hugely improved upon. However, engagement in physical activity, something totally looks different to football. You see over this side, there's only half the group because the rest of them are playing, and they're just free. Go and experiment, go and explore, go and do something that looks totally different to football. Go and roll, go and jump over them. I have no preference as to how I set the course. You complete the course how you want to complete the course. You argue with each other that you cheated and you didn't do it quick enough, and as you can see with that lad there. So that's what it's about, but it's about that engagement and promoting the engagement within physical development. And the idea of this is, again, not to learn how to crawl properly or learn how to crawl through a hurdle. Who cares about that? It's to take them neurologically to something totally different to what they're going to perform in. The next one is we're looking at slightly older. So again, we've narrowed in the range that they need to the range that we need to go to. We don't need to go totally away, although at times we will. And we're gonna work on skills that perhaps don't increase physical load, but will have an impact on physical performance. We're going to increase cognitive load, and we're also going to use it within a rehab setting. So the lad may have an ankle injury, so we want to have a look at what's going on within the ankle without him knowing it, and also as a decision-making and functional activity. So the task is 3 buckets, and I'll say to you, okay, at the end of the task, I want you to have an equal number of balls in each bucket. Okay, so loads of ankle range, deep squat, not looking perfect technique by any stretch in terms of a squat, but his focus is purely a cognitive one. We've got a whole range of different motor skills and loads of different activities going on there. So you have someone there who is a central midfield, my cheesy face. You have someone there who's a central midfield player who is a fantastically talented boy who any physical skill or coordination skill you throw at him, no problem, I'll pick it up. We all know those type of people. We'll pick it up. So we really need to challenge him cognitively. So on the pitch, he sees things that you need to stop a video to see, that kind of thing. Whereas we can get him in that environment, rack up the complexity of the drill in this room, and rack up the sort of the stimulus that's going on in that room, and really challenge him. So, like I say, we start with 1 bucket. Just catch and put it in. We go on to 2 or 3, and the challenges become, can you get equal numbers? And then ultimately, can you go, I want you to have the least number in here, and then I want you to have 1 more in here, and 1 more in here. And it's a peripheral vision, it's a multitude of different stimuli that are happening. And this kind of training, doesn't look anything like football, but these guys love doing it day before a game. Okay, day before training, I'm going out like this, wired out onto the pitch. But they love doing it day before, and they feel it's part of their preparation. I guess also the next one I'll share with you is kind of just as a way of how we put it together. Okay, so these are training things in isolation. How does it affect the pitch, and how do we pick out things and use skills like this and to identify performance enhancement on the pitch? Again, we're going closer than this to the effective sport that he wants to play and the movement he wants to make on the pitch, but it's something that's really foreign to him. So the next one is just how it all builds together and how the picture sort of starts to come together from a physical reaction and technical point of view. So one way, really strong, can't physically cope with it the other way. Can't physically cope. Looks horrible, lots of hip sway, uncompact, just not a nice pattern. 8, 12 weeks, 3 times a week. Before training, come in, 15 minutes. We're hammering this day in, day out, and I'm challenging you. You are not allowed to go that way. You must keep doing this way. And this is an example of what we talk about in getting bogged down in numbers. Okay, so there's again another super talented lad, but someone those are the subtleties. Those are the subtleties in performance that you can't measure by a number. Those are the subtleties in performance that, if I'm driven by funding, which unfortunately a lot of people are, I'll never go there, because really, can I prove the efficacy of that program, which is a kind of a grey area, but it's one of those that the movement program really should sit between strength and conditioning, between medical, between coaching, and pick up everything that falls between the gap. So in a performance development environment, whose problem is that? So I've got a centre, or I've got a player who can't turn off this shoulder. Well, it's not a problem with the ball, so it's not my problem, coach. He's strong enough, not my issue, strength coach. Well, he's not injured, not my issue on the physio, never gets touched. Yet there's a direct knock-on to performance. And I think that's kind of my key message is we can get really sort of applicable and linear with our programs, but are we really affecting the outcome that we want to do at the end? So all of the stuff that we go and we say, let's train out here, let's train out here, let's train out here, never get away from the fact that this is ultimate performance that we're after, and it's a very, very performance-driven program. So I guess really for me, in summary from all of this is just I would implore you to sort of consider the idea of incorporating motor enrichment between your programs. Again, not only for injury resilience, but also ultimately what we're all here for is to become better and to be higher level performers. And if we're working with young players, be patient and don't be afraid to sacrifice the performance in training today to actually have a longer term view and not be too blinkered in that. That's it. Any questions? Please come over.
Hi. Well, thanks for that. Has the program been in place long enough that you're able to quantify that sort of motor development enrichment early on with an elite performer when they get to professional level 18, 22, etc.?
Okay. The program has been evolving over the last 5 years.
Okay.
So in answer to go through the entire pathway, no, it's still an evolving and fairly new practice. Although what we do see in the short term, which I haven't shared today, but in terms of around those middle age groups, in terms of the injury incidence in growth-related injury, by putting in diversification, the drop was fairly significant over the first 2 years of the implementation of the program. It has remained fairly steady since. That will always in our environment be affected by the surface you play on, the conditions, the weather conditions, etc. But no, not going through the whole program, but certainly in the short term, looking at our injury markers, it's had a good positive impact.
Thank you.
So you say that it's not quantifiable to funders, but you then just showed us that video of a guy doing 12 weeks of exercise and doing something amazing afterwards.
Yeah.
Can't you just be using that to show that to funding?
The most difficult thing for the program, the efficacy of the program, is measurement of it, because when we get to that guy doing what he does, there's no standard drill. All the drills are made bespoke to the player and to the issue that he faces. So in answer, yes, that's exactly what I do. That's how in our environment we do that. But it's not. What I mean is we're not going, okay, let's do a general agility program for. So go back to the first slide. The environment that I work in is 190 players. I can't make 190 case studies of individual performance outcomes. It's not measurable in that sense. So I guess the older age groups it's a lot more quantifiable, and the younger age groups it's less so, because again, the objectives of the program in the younger age groups is to make someone have a bigger range of movement skills. How do you test that? Because you end up testing for the test, or training for the test. That I guess is kind of my perennial problem, quandary.
Thanks so much for the talk. So you talked about, this is really weird microphone, you talked about the youth development, but what about an adult performer who hasn't gone through these stages? Would you see that it's actually the same development for someone, because they've essentially missed their windows, so to speak? Yeah. They would still need to develop all the foundational skills to stay injury-free, to have a longevity, to have a long career. What are your thoughts on that?
So one of the big challenges for us is we don't have the same set of cohort go smoothly through. So again, performance related, we have releases, we also have signings that come in. So yes, it's a challenge, but again, let's not get away from the fact that it's a stimulus response that we're after. So we're not trying to take the time to learn too many skills. So we need to learn skills to do acrobatic exercises, of course. We need to learn them to do them effectively and to do them safely. But to drop somebody into a dosing stimulus program doesn't become too much of an issue. The issue more for us becomes around previous training load and previous training volume and history and intensity. That probably poses more of an issue coming into our program than diversification, which we can dose with our program. Yeah.
I'm curious about the psychological and social aspects of the program. So obviously you're kind of trying to surprise them.
Yep.
But that means that you can't necessarily tell them what the objectives of the training are. So how do you deal with that from a social and psychological perspective? How do you interact with them? How do you kind of talk to them about the sessions and how well they're doing or how well they're not doing? Or
yeah. Again, this will vary hugely in age that I'm delivering to. So, but if we take again an older lad who I'm thinking of turning off one side, turning off the other, a real thinker. You know, if I tell you that that's your problem, I am going to think about that. And if I think about that, I'm never actually going to transfer it to the pitch. So it needs to become a little bit more implicit. So in someone like that, I won't tell them. What I'll do is I'll set up a drill which forces you to do the movement that I'm trying to get you to do. From a psychological perspective, a lot of the training is kind of developed with the club psychologist, a guy called Tim Harkness, who he wanted to train focus. I wanted to train movement. They're the same, you know. You train them together. So in terms of coaching them in terms of their progression, by setting competitive games, they see whether they're improving or not. If I wanted a small technical coached point, then again, I'm going to talk to them in terms of what exactly it is that I want. But they'll see their progression from a improvement in the score of the game or that kind of approach. I'm very much more trying to get them engaged in doing something that is fun and engaging and getting what I want out at the other end than trying to bring them too sort of conscious into the movement pattern that I'm after. Try and take that approach, really.
How do you isolate the issue that you want to treat? So do you just watch them for hours, or do they come to you with an issue?
Yeah, good question. So that is, again, our program is player-centered, coach-led. So the coach may well pick out and identify. He's slow on the turn. That might be what I get. A lot of the time now with the older age groups, they set their own goals. So they set their own football objectives. So they say, I want to be better at defending 1v1. Okay, so then we go, okay, what are the components to that? What do you need to be better at? And we actually get them to set their own goals. So probably 85% of the time, they'll come to me with the issue that they want, and then we'll sit down together. I'll say, okay, go and pick out 5 clips as to why. You know, you've got to come here with a reason and have examples in the match. And then we'll start to look and break down the movement a little bit. And it might not be what they think it is, but often than not, it is. We try and promote that ownership of their program and educate them to understand what it is they need. Because again, ultimately, they're going to go out on loan. They're going to go out on their careers. We we can't be realistic. If we get one in the first team over every season, we've done fantastically well. The other 15, they're going to go out and make careers somewhere else without the support that we have. So no, we try and give them the ownership and educate them to know what it is that they want.
In terms of circus performers who specialize in a couple of different disciplines, or athletes who do the same, such as heptathletes and decathletes, would you think that doing that has the benefits of the breadth of training in itself? Or if you're already training in, say, 10 different events, would you then suggest like training more broadly than those things?
Yeah, in that instance, I would think about it more in terms of an alternative sport program to an alternative movement program. So how much more then could we go away from it from a movement perspective? So, you know, someone like someone who trains excessively in a javelin and a running and fairly similar shoulder mechanics positions, well, what else can we do there? What other movement patterns could we do? Could we do quadrupedal patterns? Could we do tripedal patterns? And actually look at it from a movement perspective point of view, as opposed to honing it into specific sports. We can't provide a sport diversification program because we don't have the time or the facility, but we can do a movement diversification. I would just say that we just focus a little bit more on the different movements that occur. The training load for someone like that is through the roof anyway. But again, that dosing effect of weeks within the blocks within their program would certainly be where they go and do different things. And certainly it's a bit of give and take. You might have to take some direct training load there of that center column. You're going to have to take some time away from that to dedicate to the other areas. Okay.
Hi there. So you've been motor enrichment training for 5 years. Is there any who's been doing it longer? Is there long-term stuff that you can study and we can learn from? For example, any other big flash football teams been doing it longer? Any outcomes that they have that you haven't seen yet?
In a word,
or is it just brand new?
It's fairly new. I haven't come across another team sport, especially that runs a movement development program or has a movement specialist, if you like. And I've obviously through my doctoral studies as well, I'm trying to. I'd like to find someone else who's in the same boat so we can bounce some things around, but. There's people that the diversification model is probably as close as you would get, early diversification versus early specialization. And there's retrospective questionnaire studies on elite performers who are now in top performers, and they say, now tell me what you did when you were 5 to 15. Now obviously there's kind of reliability issues with studies like that, but there's around that, but not directly, I'm afraid. No.
I'm curious, you were talking mostly from a perspective of coaching and teaching, but from the perspective of an individual practitioner, how would one apply what you're talking about? You're talking about being sneaky for the athletes so they don't know what they're supposed to be trying to do. How do we do that for ourselves?
Good question. I guess you can't. Essentially, if I'm trying it on myself, I'm going to know what I'm after.
Do you ever try the things for yourself?
Yeah, I try these for myself, but it's also setting the games or the objectives of the tasks to be complex enough that actually they just produce the movement that you want them to do. So I'm chasing that ping pong ball that drops into that corner there, and by getting there, I do what I'm supposed to do. If I don't get there, I haven't done what I'm supposed to do. It's kind of an outcome-based task.
There's an inherent sort of confirmation bias if you already know what you're doing. Is that what you're saying?
But what I'm saying is if somebody has an imbalance in the way that they move, and they do it great one way, but they don't do it great the other, so they're more successful on one way, and they're less successful on the other side, then I'm going to train at the same speed on both sides, and I'm going to drive a pattern that I want by dictating the speed. Do you see what I mean? But it's a difficult one to do yourself. But there's still the idea of enrichment doesn't have to be It doesn't have to be cloak and dagger. Cloak and dagger is kind of is a very small part of and for specific individuals who might just bring everything far too conscious and never transfer it to the pitch. The most difficult thing is transferability into the performance arena, and when you get someone that is a real thinker and they're never going to transfer it, you kind of have to be a bit of cloak and dagger, but I wouldn't go there. That was probably a bad example. I wouldn't go there any more than 1 time out of 10 maybe.
There's so much asymmetrical training, and what I do is it's very much sort of functional training using aerial apparatus, and so everything always has to be symmetrical, and that's something that's really uncomfortable for a lot of people. They will just avoid doing their other side. I think the way we can apply this is to go out of our comfort zones and do things which feel confusing or unfamiliar. And that can be so many different possibilities, so many different variations of that.
I agree, totally agree. I think another issue with variation is some people just go out and do, right, what's the most opposite thing I can think about? Okay, and in some instances that might be that might provide the outcome, but actually, again, going back to performance, and are we trying to make ourselves better, is actually, can we choose activities that are different from ours, but actually complementary at the same time? So not just doing variation for variation's sake, is actually trying to have a little think about, again, every discipline will be different, every sport will be different, but actually try and think about other things that, okay, what are the carryover aspects that actually I'm doing different, but I'm still working in there a little bit. So the fact of working here doesn't mean we ignore the middle. We actually still, there is some vague crossover there, but we're getting our variety. I think that's kind of important too.
I got the microphone, so I'm going to go. I think it's really interesting because I've had this discussion here at National Centre about, I think within circus, the different, if you broadly say between juggling, aerial and acrobatics, they use the body in such a different way and the brain in such a different way. So, I mean, some of the things you're talking about, I mean, you could just do some juggling. Similarly, you just train your brain and the connections in a different way. However, it feels like some of the focus within the circus world now is to become really good, you have to specialize really early. So within the degree, when you get into the degree, you're encouraged to specialize very, very soon. The jugglers will not do all the other classes. People who don't do juggling, they don't necessarily have to do juggling, or maybe it's just for a term or 2 terms. So there will be other people who know exactly. But the feeling is that to get up to the really high skill level that people feel you need to get to, you have to do that. I mean, in a 3 years degree, for how long would you say that people should keep doing the other disciplines, or at what point do you think, or is it like you say that it should be more like dose?
I would dose it. I would dose it during that period. Again, you're going to have different disciplines which require different levels of motor skill development, which will take different amounts of time to actually reach that ability level that you're talking about. So just dosing at those times. If you carry on specialising early and carry on through there, some people get away with it. Tiger Woods got away with it now, made $1 billion, but look at him now, two back surgeries, an ACL, partial Achilles rupture, and he was on TV swinging the club at 2 years old. So people like to look at that as an example, but actually when you're in an area which, no matter how long you go, you're not going to make £1 million or £1 billion, then you need to have a little bit of a longevity. So I would say, of course, you need to specialise at some point. I'm talking early specialisation, really prior to the age of 15, 16. But after that, a dosing effect for me is a good approach. Yep.
I think it's really interesting, the thing with that you practice the head at the same time as you practice the body. Mm-hmm. Because it's on a football, I imagine. I played a little bit football, but not in professional level at all. Mm-hmm. But it's this, when you run, you have to see where all the other players are, and then you have to, what you practiced a lot is be there at the right spot and hit it exactly so you're gonna go your goal, or you're gonna deliver the ball. Yeah. And you can practice the move, but you cannot practice it in real life. But by practicing the brain the whole time, so the body adapts to real life. Yeah. And this, I think, we can use a lot. Mm-hmm. in circus also, and I think that's how we can how do you say it, like make it small? Minimize the injury of training. I think it's that's really brilliant.
Yeah, thank you. I think in a lot of sports and a lot of disciplines now, we're certainly not maxing out, but we're getting closer to the gains we can get from a purely physical development. So especially within our sport, you know, everyone loves to look at the Barcelonas of this world that play fantastic football, and they're the smallest guys on the pitch. Yet they know what they're doing one step ahead. So the benefits that you're going to get from a cognitive training, I think at the moment where there's not a lot of cognitive training going on, are going to be bigger sometimes than people who are already physically looking for those, you know, the classic marginal gains or the small gains that people get. I think there's bigger scope perhaps for performance benefits there. So.
This is quite a specific one, but it just comes down to throwing and catching people, and having that as a very specific thing that you need to be in a good position for. But also, the idea of like catching a foot in the air can be a long learning process, and it would be so nice to accelerate that using other things that complement it. And would that come down to just being like having people throwing balls at you all the time, or finding sports where you're using your hand-eye coordination more? I don't know. How do you find a complementary kind of dropping, jogging? Oh, juggling.
I think the art of catching any object, the art of catching a human which is unstable and you're not sure where they're coming from, the way you can get lots of neuroresponse from that is again young, but at any age is kind of different shapes, weights, sizes. So for example, if you're juggling, I've got 3-4 balls, all a different shape, size and weight. All those kind of neural adaptations that you can do from that. That might be something that's familiar. But I think finding complementary activities from there is about looking at and breaking them down a little bit. I'll off the top of my head, in terms of catching people, you should have cut his question off first. But no, it's an interesting one, and this is why I found doing this today really challenging for me, because like I say, when I talk to other football coaches, or I talk to other team sports, or to come and sort of challenge myself and talk to you guys I found it great for me. But exactly questions like that, I kind of going, okay, all right, I don't want to be beaten here, but put me on the spot. But no, I'll have a think, we'll have a chat, and see if we can come up with something. All right? And then share it, obviously, of course. We're all about sharing.